So quickly, maybe not quickly. So if any of you have any questions up front, raise your hand. Plenty of time at the end. Are you hearing? Is the feedback okay? I can't tell.
I'll look at it.
So anyone have any questions about the topic you'd like me to cover? All right, no problem. So the slides, there's going to be a lot of links in the slides. So there's a link, a bit.ly link here that's referring to the presentation. I'll put it at the end as well. So I'll give you a minute to take that down. But there are a bunch of links for like sample tools. Most of the tools, as I'll go through, are either, they're all available on the web, obviously, but most are free. We'll have some free versions for you. So what I'm going to talk about, I'll go quickly about my company, myself, just so you have an idea of why performance is important to me and how long I've been doing it. Talk about why it actually is important with a case study and some random data. And then get into the tools. Tools that we use, tools that I've used in the past. These tools will be things that you can use on existing sites, on sites that you're currently in development, on potentially if you're trying to get new clients and you want to tell them that their site needs to be fixed in certain ways. And then, of course, follow it up with some questions and open discussion. So about Endeavor, we are headquartered in Colorado. That means that I'm in Colorado. I do have two other founders. I moved out to Colorado about a year ago. I'm from the Northwest, Idaho and Washington originally. Went to New Jersey for a long time. It's a long story. Went to school out there to get my Bachelor of Science, which I'll talk about. We are a distributed company. We have one of our recent employees actually moved to Cincinnati, so we are now getting more and more west, hoping everyone moves out west. After the experience of our developers or engineers currently, it's 15 years. That's not like a barrier. You can't enter without 15 years, which happens to be the case at the moment. It's great. One of our pluses, I feel like, is we do a lot of open source development for clients, and we like to give back to communities, whether it's presentations like this, but mainly open source contributions. So 4 hours a week, each of our employees has the ability to any open source project they like. Most of our work is in WordPress plugins, but every once in a while we'll contribute something that we've done, and I'll show you an example of that as well. But it's one of the things we feel like is important as an agency that gets a lot out of the community. Some of our active clients, we're a new company, so hopefully that list grows even more. But quickly about myself. So I am the quote-unquote president. I have a development background, so I'm more day-to-day as a technical architect at Endeavor. I'm one of the technical architects. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in New Jersey. That's why I stayed out for so long. I met my wife. I've been building websites since college. So 19 plus years doing that professionally, as in getting paid for it. A little bit longer doing some for myself before that. 2009 was my first WordPress project. I had done a lot of CMSs that are proprietary and non-existent anymore before that. But I did a first project for MTV actually. One of the benefits of living in New Jersey and working in New York is you get all these big names. Twitter and LinkedIn if you want to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm around. But if you have any follow-up questions, probably the best way to initially contact me would be through, let's say, Twitter or LinkedIn. So the case study. So 303 Magazine is a Denver digital property. They were originally a magazine. They're digital only now. They reached out to us probably 5 months ago or so. And just with some initial questions, and I looked at their site, it actually was down. So I was like, well, you guys probably want to talk to us pretty quickly, right? And they were like, yeah, the performance is really coming to a halt. Their current developer wasn't focused on WordPress. He had basically supported it for a number of years and just kept it running. And for varying reasons, which I'll talk about, the performance continued to slow down to the point where they were hosted on AWS with a massive infrastructure, actually, and it just wasn't maintaining any type of traffic. So we took them on, and one of the things I did initially was install New Relic. New Relic is a paid monitoring system, monitoring tool. They do have some freer versions as well, but what this does is it's installed on the server. Some hosts actually allow you to do that, or they have a relationship with them. Other hosts you wouldn't be able to do that, so it really depends on your host. If you're doing it yourself, obviously you can install it. But it gives you a number of graphs. This was one of the graphs that I saw before we engaged with them, so I asked them to install it and then just give me access to New Relic. And you can see on the left the database throughput. If you can read it, it's over 100,000 connections per minute. And based on the traffic that I was seeing, this was like, I think it was like 2,000 to 3,000 queries per page load on any page, which is, even for a large media site, is really not good. We took them over. I made a couple of changes in a couple of hours, and it dropped to, a decent amount. Still not great, but well below what they were doing. And essentially, just to give you some of the background, they had a premium theme, and it was built for a certain type of site. One of the things on it was it would scan through all the pages, the number of pages, and then basically build widgets for each one of those pages, or the ability to have widgets for each one of those page types. This one was using NextGen, the gallery module or plugin that basically creates a new page for every gallery. They happen to have a lot of galleries. That's one of their big traffic drivers. They can do a lot of photo galleries. So they had about 2,000 pages. So 2,000 pages doing 2,000 loops of queries, doing a single request for something that they actually didn't need. So I cut that out, and that's how we got the big gain. So it wasn't super magical, but I wouldn't have been able to do that just looking through plugins. Their existing developer had disabled all the plugins. Still, nothing happened because it was in the theme code, not the plugins. Just another graph. So this graph is actually doing some web transaction times, so front end. So New Relic will install some JavaScript to the front end and monitor real-time traffic and tell you how slow or fast your site is, and monitor it over the course of a long period of time, if you like. Again, this is just showing the one immediate change and actually dropping it quite a bit. We've done more changes recently, but this was the one that kind of pointed me to. So if you look at the green, it's a WP post meta select. Just seemed really off to me, which is why I was able to go into the, once I did get the code a couple of days later, looked at it immediately, knew I was going to be looking at the theme code, looked for some loops with doing queries, and quickly found what I had to do based on some of these graphs. So this is a before and after. So this is another tool that I'll talk about, but it basically allows you to put up two websites. In this case, it's the same website. And either do one link or multiple links. So this is going to go to, going to try to load the homepage, then go to a channel page, and then go to an article. Pretty common steps if someone's going directly to the homepage of a user. And to show you kind of the difference from a user's perspective of a faster site versus a really slow site. And so it works. Yeah, so it's going to play. It was already loaded, but it's going to go again now. So on the left side is the faster site. It's already on the channel page right now. The first page is, I think, or sorry, switch. So the right side is the faster one. So it's already on the article page now. This one, the one on the left, is on the channel page. Still kind of loading, trying to load the page. Trying to load the article page now. Waiting. It's about 25 seconds, I think. I think it'll tell us how long it took to get to 3 pages of the site. Still loading. All right. So yeah, faster, but so it's 40 seconds to get to 3 pages of the site. So you can imagine, the users were not very happy when the site was up, but when they did get any type of traffic, their infrastructure just couldn't handle it either. So, as you can imagine, less users because they were so upset. Some stats, some actual stats around traffic. So these are their Google Analytics. It's essentially going up. I'll give you the real numbers later, but The typical media site, if you've ever maintained a media site where they have a good article, or some event is going on in the city, like if anyone was covering football today, they'd have a nice spike on football. But here was the actual numbers. So sessions up, users up, page views up. I'd love to say that we made this change and then that's why they got all this extra traffic. Yes, a little bit, but the reality was they were actually getting some really good articles, a lot of Facebook likes. They wouldn't have been able to support that without the changes that we made, but it wasn't all because of performance made more users come to the site instantly. That's a long tail thing. So once your performance gets improved, it'll take a while before your traffic gets built up. But if you weren't handling the existing traffic, which was the case here, you're going to see some of those stats up because of that, just because people can actually see the site finally. So this is another set of stats, and a different idea. Mobile. So even now, we've got really good connections, or better connections than we had 3, 4, 5 years ago. But the reality is, unless you're like on a Wi-Fi with your phone, which a lot of people are, but a lot of times they're traveling to work, or on a bus, or in a park, and they're looking at sites on their phone or on an iPad with a relatively decent connection, but not great. So if you're not having a site that's performant, those users are actually going to get impacted the most. And now with the growing trends, those are the most likely people to use your site in the first place. So by impacting the mobile users, you're going to have a bigger impact of your site than let's say a couple of years ago. And then also the smaller devices, as you saw with the two showing the two sites, if you think about it on a phone for that site, the site is massively long. So you're actually not even seeing, and that's some of the improvements we'll probably do along the way for that site. You have to target what your users are seeing. So if you have all this content, they're not even really seeing. So there's ways to make it lazy loading, essentially, or even just not have so much content that they're not even going to need. So this is another big one, and this has really been around for a while. At one point I had a stat here, or a quote here from Google. So I've done similar talks for about 4 or 5 years on performance. We all know that Google is really concerned about their users and the users, their impact, or the web's impact on their users. Because when people go to Google, type in something, and they go to a site, a lot of times the perception is that site is Google's fault if the site is slow. And they know that. So what they've done is, it's essentially improved their algorithm to point at faster sites. And that worked pretty well. Some sites adopted it, but not. And then the media sites started adding on a bunch of extra libraries, tracking libraries and everything. And then Google and also Facebook, which I'm showing here on the right. So they both implemented basically lighter weight code base that they'll display to their users. So on the left, if you're implementing AMP, Google's version of a mobile site essentially, if you're implementing that, which with WordPress, you can install a plugin and you'll basically get this. I should have updated this for this week, but I spoke in Denver and showed the same screen. This is our site. Our logos are red. We could actually change the blue to red, so there are things that you can do, but essentially now, because sites haven't adopted the performance, they're forcing us to basically use their technologies, which are going to be much lighter weight. Initially, they'll grow eventually, but it's a much more streamlined version, which is good for most sites because, for our site, maybe we'd like the logo to appear, but really we only want people to look at content, and we don't care about all the tracking things.
So,
yes.
So there's a plugin called AMP that I can put on my WordPress site, and if you look at my site through a mobile device, it would run through AMP and it would minimize the information so people don't get.
Very close. Yeah. So it doesn't do it on. So if I go to your site directly on a phone, if you've installed the plugin, and I go there directly, it's not going to redirect them or anything like that. But part of the plugin will tell Google that you do have that type of page. So when Google indexes your site over the next days or weeks it takes, if I go to Google, do a search First off, you actually will come up higher in the results if I'm on a phone than a competitor, let's say, or someone that's having similar, that they haven't implemented it. They're going to link them directly to a version like this. Now if I click on, so that top link, Endeavor, is clickable. Once I click that, I go into the more normal experience because my home page doesn't have a version. The AMP plugin essentially does it for pages and blog posts, and also custom post types if you add those later. But we would have to do development to do that. So it'll shift between, but Google really cares about that first page for now.
If your site is already very mobile friendly,
Yep.
would you bother with AMP as well?
I don't know how strict they're going to get going forward, because I think you're already getting benefits because you've done that, you're responsive, let's say, possibly, so it looks good. But they're concentrating on performance as well. So making your site responsive doesn't necessarily mean it's more performant for a handheld device. It looks better, but it's still probably actually heavier than it was before because of the extra CSS. Generally, sometimes even the markup for the menu is extra. So it's a pretty simple plugin. So the plugin I found has some side effects. It conflicts with some Jetpack functionality. So it's not that it breaks your site, but it actually, whether it's Jetpack or other plugins, will add JavaScript or various things that will make it invalid. So there's more than just enabling the plugin and then your site is magically amped, let's say. You then have to go into Google's Webmaster Tools and see how it's indexing it and see if there's any errors, because other plugins do conflict. And the one on the right is much more complex. That's for bigger media sites. That's the Facebook Instant Articles. There's a plugin for that as well. But that's, once you're at that level, you're still going to be doing development because you're going to make it look as nice as possible. All right, so let's get into the tools. We're not going to use those tools. The first tool I like to use is of course, knowledge. Going a little deeper into both why this is important as well as some really good techniques. I'll go through some techniques, but I'm really going to focus on tools. This book is a short book. It's like, I don't even know if it's 100 pages, 120 pages maybe. It's a thin book. A lot of great information on mainly designing, but designing for performance as far as making it still look really nice, not just having a plain white page. The nice thing also is that all the proceeds, the author donates all the proceeds to a number of charities, whether they're charities or initiatives for within development and helping other people. I think she's now the director of engineering, or one of the directors of engineering at Etsy. Etsy does a lot of open source development for around performance that they publish with Bulldoes. So this one I showed you earlier. It's a pretty good tool. The downside that I've seen more recently, and I'm trying to find another one. So the last talk I got into hearing about the benefit of using HTTPS and also the performance benefits. Well, this actually can't monitor secure sites. So this is just what it would show if you try to monitor two secure sites. Nothing. I'm trying to find another one like this, but there are other tools that allow you to kind of monitor the two sites. And what I showed earlier was showing some improvements that you've made to one site. But again, I think you could use this tool for comparing if you're trying to get a client or trying to get your boss to spend some time or resources on performance. You can show them your site versus a competitor site. Hopefully they're, assuming the other site's faster, of course, because we all like to manipulate data a little bit, so find the right competitors. But it's a visual representation of it, which is pretty powerful versus just stacks and numbers. So these tools are great for things like you're coming into a client, you have an existing website, and you want to take a look at a few pages or see why the site's slow. Maybe you look at the site and you want to see what's going on. These three tools do very similar things. They've come out to varying years. They've been out for a long time, actually. I would say, the AOL web page test I was using in, I think, like 2002, 2003, when they were starting to move to the web. If you remember far enough back, they weren't always on the web, on the internet. They were only in AOL. So they developed a number of tools. So essentially what these tools do, you type in a URL, paste in a URL. If you want to use the web-based version, it'll give, and then it instantly gives you some results. The best part about these results is, well, it gives you a grade, so which is something you can actually, look at it and see why. And it'll tell you some bullet points of what you can improve. It's possible that you're not going to be able to improve everything. If your page is just too, big for content reasons, or you have to have a certain amount of content, you might not be able to fix it. If you have to use third-party scripts to do certain tracking and they're not improving their scripts, you're not going to be able to fix those. But one nice thing is it'll show you for images on your site. And it gives you a nice little tool that, it's not even a tool, it's a link, that if your images can be compressed better, you can just download it. So it gives you the link to download the compressed version. And if these are for like the big image on your homepage or something like that, you download it, you upload it into your plug or your theme directory, you look at it, if it's great, you just go with it. You might have a 50% improvement just for downloading the link and uploading it. So Yahoo, YSlow, and Google PageSpeed are actually integrated into browsers as well with plugins. So these are nice tools for, you look at a page, you can, if you have your developer tools, you can basically click on the browser and get that same information as you're browsing the web versus having to go to another site and paste in that. They're basically doing the exact same thing, and they give you a lot of similar information. These tools, again, are for if you're not needing to monitor a site, like long term, you just want to figure out what's wrong initially and then go from there. On the front end, these work really well. So WordPress is open source, so why would we show a bunch of proprietary tools for monitoring? So we're going to show you an open source tool that we've developed based on, so by develop, I mean we basically put a number of things that are already out there together to give you kind of an all-in-one box. This is not for the basic user, let's say. This is for a company or maybe a service company that wants to provide this for their clients. It's putting together all these technologies. So Sitespeed.io is similar to the ones that I showed you before in the sense that you could go in and type a URL. The difference here is that if you install it and run it, it'll actually monitor that data. So it'll do all that information, but it'll do it every 5 minutes, every hour, every day, whatever you kind of want to do, and it'll track it, and it'll send it into other systems. So in this case, and it uses, the middle is Selenium. That's how it's using some of the browsing and actually getting that data. The graphite logo on the bottom left is the storage of that data. And I'll go into some of this detail. But I didn't add some of these other things like Grafana. That storage and the graphing actually looks a lot nicer. So when you put all these together, you get basically, let me go into, go to that page. So this is on GitHub. You can go here and basically, if you like to clone it, and if you have bigger, that's getting a little bit deeper. But there's some instructions here on how to do it, installing and everything. So Grafana, the one on the left, basically gives you a graph like this, which is okay. It gives you the data, so you can see it over a period of time. It's not super user intuitive, let's say. It's a little bit more focused for development. But if you install the whole thing, you get Grafana. And Grafana is a dashboard tool that gets your graphs looking a lot more like this. Comparing, for various sites, if you're comparing two sites over the period of time, if you're comparing different types of data, you can do all this, and it's all based on a UI. And there's also other contributed files that you can basically upload and get better graphs. And if you can imagine a dashboard, so you can have all these graphs on a page or on a big screen, and it's live interactive depending on how quickly you're monitoring the site. So this is the free version, essentially. It's going to cost you money for hosting this server. And for us, we host it on DigitalOcean. We do, I think, I think we're up to a 4 gig droplet at this point, so we spent a decent amount of money for it. We could probably spend less money on the proprietary ones that I'll talk about now, but we can do anything we want with it. So, and you don't have to have that big of an infrastructure if you're monitoring smaller sites. We have to monitor some of the bigger media sites which have a lot of bloat, a lot of JavaScript, unfortunately. So, these go from a freemium option up to paid, and I'll talk about what those different versions get you a little bit. All of these do essentially what I just showed you in the open source version, but you don't have to do anything. You go in, you create an account. They're all basically, you can do a certain amount for free by just creating an account, putting in a URL, and it'll monitor your site for you. It'll send you alerts also. If you just want to have, you don't want to get calls from your clients or calls from your boss if the site's down. You want to put some monitoring in place so that you're getting alerts beforehand if your host isn't doing that for you. So Ping Them is one that I've used for a long time, well, 4 or 5 years. It does exactly that. You type in, you're pasting the URL for the pages you want to monitor. It will give you some basic performance data for absolutely free. And it'll also monitor those sites. So if the site goes down, you'll get an email alert. You can get SMS alerts and a number of other alerts from Ping Them as well. Status Cake is one that actually came out more recently that I started to look at, and we're actually paying for that. So even though we have our free open source one, we also pay for Status Cake for our clients so we monitor all of them. Not just for performance, but also it gives us the alerts. Status Cake gives us so it'll try to log into the server if we give it current credentials. It'll hit different types of pages. It'll try to log into the front end of the site for us, and it gives us alerts on performance or uptime, and a lot of graphs as well. The bottom, I'll skip over New Relic for a second because I showed that earlier, and I'll come back to it. SpeedCurve is a paid service as well, and it's using some open source technologies in the background. But putting some really great graphing interfaces on the front of it, so you can actually manipulate this data and get some alerts. If you're going into the paid model of paying for one of these, I really like New Relic, but it does get very expensive. It depends on the needs, obviously. If you are monitoring a site that has a number of servers or just a lot of traffic and you want to know why certain pages are up or down, they have some good plugins for their plugins, internal plugins basically, that monitor certain pieces of WordPress. So it's very specific to WordPress, so they know what to look at. That's what I was showing you before. It'll tell me if individual plugins are slow. It'll tell me if I'm getting too many cron requests for internal things. It'll tell me if the admin is affecting the front end. So a lot of very specific detail about the actual server. If you're not a server architect or sysadmin, you can get it installed, and then you don't have to actually go into the server and monitor things like the performance on the actual server. It'll do all that for you in graphing. So the important part about these graphing is that when you do updates, whether they're to improve it or if you're just doing development and you put something out and then a week later people are saying, why is the site so slow? You can go back and you can see why that happened. Or hopefully you can get an alert to prevent it in the first place. So I'm not going to go to this page. I have some slides that actually show some of the data. So this site's been up. This is the HTTP archive. They're actually monitoring a wide range of sites. There's a different version of it that actually monitors the visual, what websites have looked like over years. This page of the HTTP archive gives us the trends. So how the websites have been doing for page load, for are we still using Flash, which I'll show you in a minute, the adoption of custom fonts and things like that. So one of the tools, or one of the stats, and I call this a tool because similar to how I opened it, you need to be able to kind of convince people to actually spend time or resources on performance in order to be able to do the things. So it's one thing to have the tools, but if you can't get people to spend the money or time to use them, there's no point. So if you start giving them some stats like this, if you go back, so this is going to 2010, which is quite a bit back. You can see that we're basically continuing up a path. If you take smaller snapshots, you can see where it's kind of peaked. This is HTML size and requests. It peaks and it comes down again. That's because whether Google or some other big company put out an initiative, sometimes we have internet-wide improvements for different protocols. Also, Google will put out, or jQuery will put out the ability to pull those libraries out from their server, and those make it faster. And just by small things like that, it actually improves the web. So you see some dips, but essentially we're on another gradual climb up. If we went further back, we would have seen where there was a big push as just before bandwidth started to increase on the home, where people had bloated websites, and then it started to dip down again because of all this push for getting the sites faster on home modems and things like that. And then we got real bandwidth, and then no one cared again. And then mobile came out, and then people started to focus on it a little bit for a while. And then our services got better, and then people stopped caring again. But the thing is that while companies as a whole don't care because they feel like, all right, well, I need to put all this tracking, the reality is Google and Facebook and other places that are sending you traffic actually do care, because again, the perception is on them that your website is slow. It means that Facebook is slow or Google is slow. So CSS transfer sizes. This, I like to try to evaluate some of the data, and I think that some of the growth here has been the responsive websites. I mentioned it before, where you make a responsive website, a lot of times it's just adding CSS, if it's not done appropriately. So you add extra CSS for mobile devices. So mobile devices will pull in all the desktop stuff, as well as its version of the mobile. But you can actually optimize that quite a bit. So this is still growing, and it's going from 25K at the bottom to 67K. Again, this is over the course of 6 years, but still, it's not like sites are getting that much more complicated looking than they were 5 or even 6 years ago. They look a lot better to us, but they're not that much more complicated. In fact, they've actually been streamed down quite a bit with much more simplified designs. This is, while this is increasing, and you would almost think that this is a bad thing, what this did was replace images for a lot of things way back. So custom fonts used to, replaced image tags for if a client or a company wanted their specific fonts, they would have images on their site. That can be replaced by custom fonts. It's also going to the point where now we're using custom fonts for body content, for sidebar content. Which, if you're a designer, you want it very specific, but the reality is, there's now a push for using more of the system fonts, which have improved a lot over the years. So I think this will either flatten out, or there'll be a lot of pressure to reduce the number of custom fonts on a web page, because they are getting loaded on every page, and it does have a big impact on performance. And then this one is finally going down, but it's still 27%. I think a lot of this has to do with ads, essentially. A lot of ads are still playing Flash. A lot of sites that do video still use Flash players for their video for whatever reason, even though it's not very mobile friendly. It's not really a performance issue, it's just a pet peeve, I guess. So I did rush through a few things, but I'm happy to answer some questions as we go through this. But I talked about some very specific reasons why it is important. I think the SEO, the usability of your site is probably the two key ones. If you can figure out ways of taking that and putting a number on it, a dollar number, a page view number, whatever your business or clients need, that's where you can actually get some buy-in, essentially. I did talk about quite a few tools. There are other tools out there for doing things that are not performance related. That'll increase your traffic as well. One that I didn't talk about that I thought about was spell checking your site. If you don't have a massive site, you really should run a spell checker through it. There are external tools that'll do that for you. That's one of the biggest reasons that people have a bad impression, apparently, of sites next to performance. Do you get there and the words misspelled? I mean, grammar is another level as well, but it's a little bit harder for you to check. You can install plugins to do this for your blog posts. That's important, but especially for pages that have a little bit of content, whether it's sidebars or things like that. These will monitor your site. You can pay for them to monitor your site long term. That's one way to do it. Or you can just run it on individual pages. And there are other things like that. The trends we talked about quickly. So, whole thing we have some questions. And it can be WordPress related, it can be, yes?
One of the challenges with Yahoo's Why Slow with Google's PHP Breaker is that a lot of the suggestions are awesome for a theme developer.
Yeah.
But since most of us just use a theme, they're not that practical. Because a lot of the suggestions are things like identify your CSS, concatenate your JavaScript.
Right.
What do you
Yeah. So depending on your grade on some of those things. So he was asking about some of the recommendations you get from YSlow or Google PageSpeed or any type of thing that's going to recommend what you're, or maybe if you paid someone to come in and tell you what to fix. You've downloaded an open source theme or paid for a premium thing, and you're not a theme developer. What are some of the things you can do to help some of those? There are, and I've had these plugins in the past, but they change so frequently. There are plugins that you can get to help with that. So specifically around, there'll be a recommendation that you have too many CSS files. That's usually because you have too many plugins, most likely. So there's two problems there that you could solve. We'll probably have to adding another plugin to do it, but that's probably another talk. Because the WordPress core in a basic theme is usually going to output a couple of CSS files, 2, 3 files, and it's going to concatenate it, it's going to compress it for you. So it's going to do a really good job. If you've added other plugins, like the client I was talking about, we use NextGen, that adds its own CSS. Sometimes you're not going to get better than me on certain areas without doing development. We're in the process of actually redoing our website because we basically, a year ago we started the company. We found a really good theme. We modified it to the way we wanted it. We didn't spend a lot of time on performance, to be honest, other than the fact that we have no images on it. Basically, our site looks like this, basically. We're a technology. We're not a designer. But the number of CSS, the size of the CSS, the size of the JavaScript is all kind of bloated for a site like ours. So we're going through and we're able to remove some JavaScript and remove some CSS in our theme from core that we don't need. We don't need actually JavaScript on our site. It's interesting, but we don't have any real interactivity on our site. So we're going to remove jQuery. We're going to remove a number of things just on the front end of the site when you're not logged in, essentially. So as a developer, you can do a lot. There are a few plugins that will do it to compress the JavaScript. The other thing is with hosting. Some hosting will do a better job at compressing your HTML and your CSS, so that'll get you better grades. And then the other thing is, as a tool, is to put a CDN, a content delivery network. Those are free a lot of times, or we're very, very low pay. And that'll give you the improvements to get possibly from a VOA as well, without adding plugins or doing development.
Is there, when you say CDN, is there just give us a quick, where do you go from?
So I use Cloud. Yeah, I use Cloudflare it's free. You get a lot of functionality for free. There's Fastly is another one that's a little bit more premium. Beyond that, I'm sure there are a lot of other ones. Optimite, a lot of our clients use that, but I could never afford that for my own site. But Cloudflare, it does take some steps, but they walk you through those steps to add it to the front end of your site. So if you have administrative access essentially to your domain, you should be able to enable that. Yes?
When you hit up the plugin section to install a new one, I mean, I'm a developer, but I don't want to be when it comes to my WordPress site, so is there a good litmus test to find out which ones are good and which ones are garbage? Without installing it and,
right.
going through that nonsense.
You can. Yeah, the reviews and support see the types of issues. Some people will say say that it's slow and the issues to have them fix it. Enabling it and just looking at it sometimes is not on your production site, let's assume, but enabling it somewhere and just seeing what it looks like. That's the nice thing about some of the monitoring tools also that you can do that on a different environment and have them monitoring it and just see it. So you don't have to do anything manually, just enable it and then see what it does. If it's for purely performance. There's plenty of reasons why to not or do enable plugins for many breakthroughs. Yes?
Fonts.
Yes.
We have a big battle going on between designers and developers on that. Can you just inform us just a little more what your thoughts are? I mean, when you say the system fonts are getting better, it still seems like most of them have just kind of like a really small group of ones that everybody's using.
Yeah, they do. And so system fonts are getting better because the browser adoption and the operating systems are getting better. But better doesn't mean
More.
great to a designer.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's the battle really is you start with the lower hanging fruit where the body content doesn't really need to be a custom font, whereas Helvetica or some other or serif font like Georgia or something like that. What you could go with for the body content. The problem with just using system fonts also is that you have to have all these different iterations for system fonts for different devices. So even within an operating system, like you'll still have to have different fonts if you're going that route. But it will be a better performant for that user, a lot more work and effort, and it's going to look different, which is what the designers are going to complain about because they're not getting the same look across devices.
What about font vendors like Google Font versus the Hefler stuff versus the
Yeah. As far as performance, they all have the same downside is that you're relying on a third party to serve that, and they don't really care about your site. They want to keep the font up and maintain, but the reality is if it goes down for a few seconds or minutes every once in a while, they don't care. But it's going to affect your users. That's the one thing I look at, and I don't know one that's better than the other. Google Fonts, has a decent infrastructure, obviously. They also have a nice tool when you're creating a font to limit the amount of weighting. So if you're doing if you're going to use bold and italics, and you're only going to use a certain set of weights for it, try to use as few as possible. And weights are essentially, the more weights you add, the more weight you're adding to the font as well. So it gives you a tool, and it's actually a little dial that tells you when it's getting red or green as you add things to it. I don't know if the other ones do that. So that's a nice feature that I like. Yes?
What do you prefer for image consideration?
So I'm a developer, and I've looked up some things that I can run command line. That's one of the things that I did with 303 as well. In order to get them to a host, off of AWS, where they're able to just pay for however much disk space, which was super cheap, getting into a managed host where they had to get down to basically 25 gigs, and they were at 130 gigs of physical size. I had to optimize all those images, so I ran some scripts that took days to run. But that's a very developer focused, and honestly, I didn't even, I'm getting ready to document it, but I can't even remember the name of it. The CDNs will do some of that for you. So and also if you use Jetpack with Photon, it will add another layer of optimization. So it'll do the one request to your server, and then optimize the image for your end users, and it'll optimize it as far as size. So you're not serving a big image for a little tiny image on the website, but it also optimizes it as far as percentage-wise. Let's say you want to reduce it by 60%, you can put that into the request as well, or when you're configuring it. Yeah, I don't know of another plugin that will do it. There's WP Smush It, I think is one, and there's a few others that. The downside to those is you're basically making your server do probably more work than you should be doing for something like that. It is a one-time thing, but if you're uploading a lot of images like a big gallery, your site could be impacted to the end users versus just optimizing on your local machine. Yes?
What's your thoughts on caching as far as using a host like WP Engine or Flywheel that does the caching server side versus a plugin like WP Total Cache or WP Rocket?
Yeah, so you asked about the difference between using a host that'll do caching for you versus adding a plugin if your host doesn't add it. So if I was on a host that provided the service, I would use that because it will be more performant because the plugins again are adding some level of they're taking resources away to do that for you. Whether they're creating the request down to an HTML file or doing some type of image optimization, they are doing that. They also, as your site gets bigger, they're creating more files, and then if your site needs to be flushed, you're now flushing files versus in memory on a system that can manage that. There's a lot of cases where both can be bad. If your site is not optimized for that type of caching, I've seen performance impacts. Even by adding caching, the performance gets worse because of the number of requests. Whether it's Redis or Memcache, can't handle the number of requests on that poorly developed site. So just taking it out completely is actually an improvement.
Okay, so do you think, would you say the plugin is a better option, or if you had the choice to use hosting or plugin?
I would go with, personally, I would go with hosting because you're getting more than just that. You're getting the ability to not have to deal with random problems. They'll deal with if the site goes down in the middle of the night. They'll fix it for you. A managed host. That's why I prefer them versus the AWS when you can't. Sometimes your infrastructure requires it, or maybe you serve a lot of client sites and they can't afford $25 or $20 or even $15 a month for the managed version. They want to pay you $5 a month. So if you're in that AWS infrastructure and you can't, and you're not going to install Memcache or Redis for your clients, adding the plugin is definitely a way to go. You need to monitor it though, because each site is going to be different. If you have a lot of pages or a lot of pages and posts, some are going to actually have an impact. So I only have like 2 or 3 minutes. Anyone else? Yes.
I have a question, but I'm not sure if it's for security engineers about you know the tools that you use to determine the size elements on the
Like have a dashboard view of the size of your content?
If you're using WordPress, it has to do with something from the previous talk.
Okay.
Usually, basically, we have algorithm those, and we have that you share as a server that trouble being over virtual lights.
Yep.
And so the idea would be for customers can operate to be able to have that on their sites. But I don't have an answer yet to whether it's light enough to function correctly.
Yeah. So he was asking if there's if there's a plugin or something available to kind of monitor the size of individual assets.
Yeah.
I don't know of that. That would be an interesting one to have, especially for your media assets, to flag some of those types of things, or even in dashboard grade of your site, because the stats are pretty freely available to monitor that. And the case size for your case, you can monitor it, saying, all right, I'm in the loop for those, and they want me to be under 100K. Do I have anything? I don't know of anything.
So Backup Buddy has a tool in it that does that. It's got a little server tools section, and then you can click it. It'll show basically the size of everything on the WordPress site.
That's not free.
It's not very, but it's a great tool.
Any other questions? All right, great.